This has been one of the most disappointing gaming purchases that I have ever made. Let me outline for you my experiences of the PlayStation Portal after 6 months with it. The Portal at launch was a £200, $200, €220 remote screen with controller attached accessory to the PlayStation 5. Built on the Android platform using Qualcomm's 2020 Snapdragon 662 low mid-range mobile platform chipset, it offers remote play to your PlayStation 5 only. For many, myself included, it made no sense prior to launch. Remote play didn't change with the release of the Portal. It connected to your console via an external internet connection, the exact same way as your phone, tablet, TV, Chromecast, PC, Mac, handheld, VR headset, PS Vita, PS Portable, and some Blu-ray players have been doing since the PSP launched in 2007. This meant bit crushing, audio and visual stutters, frame drops, freezing, and complete disconnections if the network wasn't absolutely perfect for the remote play session. All of this also meant that those aforementioned remote play options were better than the Portal, because they could also remote play with the PlayStation 4, PC, and Xbox as well as the PlayStation 5. The Portal only remote played with the PS5. It also shipped without Bluetooth, so no wireless audio using earphones or buds that you already had, and no using it as an additional controller for the console, which meant no direct connection either for remote play, something phones could do. It had okay at best speakers and a proprietary audio codec for wireless listening called PlayStation Link, for which no earphones or buds were on the market at launch, and when they did come, they cost the same as the Portal itself, and they weren't actually good. The big kicker for many, though, was no native gaming. You needed a PlayStation 5 and an internet connection on both devices for this to work at all. I personally found it a heavily mixed bag. Some aspects, like the ergonomics and screen, were amazing. Others, like the main crux of the device, remote play, were different for nearly every user. It could work external to the house, but not on public Wi-Fi as there's no internet browser, and it's only good if you are the primary profile of the console, so it sucks to be the partner or the kids. It was nearly impossible to recommend the Portal at launch, as there were such heavy caveats to its usage, and everyone who would look at buying one already had devices that could do the same job, and more, better, with no further outlay. But that was 6 months ago. Now, in May 2024, the question becomes, why am I so disappointed? Now, to be fair to the device, aspects have improved. The user interface, for example, has sped up no end, so connecting to new Wi-Fi connections, new consoles, new earphones via PlayStation Link and so on is faster and much more stable than at launch. But the UI is such a small part of the experience and so limited in its use that this improvement, while welcome when interacting with the UI, is minimal at best in terms of user impact. But honestly, that's about it for improvements. There was an update that supposedly fixed some visual problems in April 2024. For me though, that hasn't been noticeable, and pretty much everything has seemingly stayed the same as at launch. On the front of updates, the PS5 got a firmware update in January 2024 to allow EQ access for PS Link headsets. This was to improve their sound performance, which had been seriously lacking at launch, a shocking development from the same company that make the highest rated headphones on the planet. This update didn't come to the Portal though, and it still hasn't. This means there is a vast difference in sound quality between the console and the Portal using the same, bespoke, designed for the device earbuds or earphones. Sure, you can just use the headphones connected to the PS5 while at home, but externally or out of range, your audio experience is exponentially worse. The Portal itself has had exactly 2 updates so far, one just after launch and the second on the 3rd of April 2024. The first one was for UI stability, the second one for video fine detail. Neither though addressed remote play itself, and were 4 to 5 months apart from one another. We're not off to a good start with these updates. And then there's the actual act of remote play. This is the core selling point of the hardware. As much as I thought this device was pointless pre-launch, Those thoughts were solely based on my superb remote play experience from my phone, tab, or even my Chromecast, PlayStation Vita, or PS4, all of which remote play fantastically with the PlayStation 5, but then do other things when the PS5 is turned off. The Portal changes nothing here. It still connects to the PlayStation 5 via an external internet connection like the aforementioned devices, but unlike those devices, it then doesn't do anything else if that connection isn't available. Making matters worse is that the Portal doesn't match up to those previous experiences either. Connecting via the exact same internet connection, it stutters, freezes, and fully disconnects so regularly that the only type of game I am always comfortable playing on it is something like Temtem due to the turn-based nature of the title. That makes it a £200 accessory to a £25 game at this point. This issue is compounded further by my phone being able to connect and remote play flawlessly the moment that the Portal fails. When all else is equal, same source, same network, same physical location, etc., and the Portal then does not perform as well in remote play as a non-dedicated piece of hardware, there is massive frustration to the user. And this is with ensuring I am on a 5 GHz connection and that every possible port is open to facilitate remote play. Short of opening myself up fully and yelling, "Come steal all my personal data, internet thieves," there is nothing more that I can do personally without further intense expenditure to improve the experience. What expenditure, I hear you think? I'm talking about a new router. Currently, I use the internet service provider issued router. This one is from Virgin Media here in the UK, and is their originally named Hub 5, being the 5th generation version. This router is at no additional charge to myself and works perfectly across my entire house for both professional and personal requirements on every single device. But there are a litany of advice videos and articles on how to make the Portal work well or better, and first on nearly every single one of them is buy a new router. These aren't cheap recommendations though. The most common recommendation is for the Asus ROG Rapture Pro, a £399 router. The serious, supposedly professional advice for one device not doing its job via the internet when every other device does is to spend twice the value of said device for a new router. That doesn't seem like legitimate or sensible advice given the circumstances. Heck, I've even had comments on my launch review video saying the same thing. I personally can't understand that thought process. Every other device does remote play to my PS5 without an additional router purchase. For example, my Chromecast, my tablet, my phone, and my PlayStation Vita. Why, therefore, does the official remote play accessory from PlayStation require an additional router purchase? There is an option to use your phone as a 5 GHz router rather than buying a new home router. There's a setting on Android high-end devices such as this Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra, and likely on things like iPhone as well, to lock your mobile hotspot to the 5 GHz frequency. Even then though, whether using it as a Wi-Fi router or a mobile data router, the same freezing, pixelation and disconnections occur as via my home Wi-Fi. There is some other advice out there that doesn't ask you to spend additional money, like this helpful short from Boxy on YouTube, stating to hardwire your PlayStation 5 via an Ethernet cable for better performance, which is superb advice, then changing resolution down to 1080p and frame rate down from 120Hz mode on the PlayStation 5 to offer the best possible experience. These settings changes did not change my experience however, and they can't be done from the Portal. You have to either do this on the console itself before using the Portal, or remember to do it before shutting the PlayStation 5 down, and then remember to change them back to 4K and 120Hz when using the console on the TV. That's a lot of constant additional steps to maybe have an accessory work better, when again, the non-dedicated options do not need this step to function. There are occasions where the Portal is flawless for me, and in those moments I understand the point and draw of the hardware. But no matter what I have tried, no matter the steps that I take to ensure a constant, good user experience, it rarely happens. Moments when the accessory works are so rare now that the last one I remember was with God of War Ragnarok Valhalla back in December 2023. That was the last time that I had a flawless remote play experience on the Portal. We're in May 2024 when this video comes out. That's nearly 5 full months of frustration with the device. Now, being fair, there is one way that I have achieved a better experience. It's still not perfect, and will still periodically stutter, freeze, and disconnect. But in fairness, it is drastically improved over my base experience. That way is to pull the HDMI out of the console. Why this works when other options make no difference to the experience, I don't know. But the experience, while still far from perfect, is improved simply by disconnecting the HDMI cable from the console. I'm not a fan of this endeavour though. While it does work better, as mentioned, it still isn't perfect. And this process puts undue wear and tear on a port that otherwise doesn't need it. But it's an option that is there if I want or need it. The fact that these connection challenges exist in the first place is disappointing. This is meant to be a really easy and accessible remote play option. And for many users, for aspects outside of their control, that has not been the case. I expect that a portion of the blame for these variances in experience is the chip that Sony chose to power the Portal. For whatever reason, they chose the Qualcomm Snapdragon 662 chipset for the Portal. The 662 is a 2020 mobile phone chip, found in entry-level phones like the Redmi 9T, the Nokia 5.4 and the Motorola Moto G30, among many other devices that cost around £150 new in 2020 and 2021. They were all basic communication devices. They could make a phone call, send text messages, maybe watch a 720p YouTube video on 4G, but mobile gaming was a touch beyond that chip, and high-speed internet access isn't possible. Something that is very useful for remote play. What baffles me about the choice of chip isn't that it is a low-end chip, or that it is 4 years old as I'm writing this line. It is that Sony have never used it before. All of Sony's smartphones run on much higher-end chips, even their cheap options like the Xperia 10 series of phones. So this wasn't a case of using leftover stock to fulfill a customer wish. If they had done that, we could have had Snapdragon 7 Gen or 8 Gen chips in the device. The 8 Gen ones being the powerhouses of the best gaming phones on the market and all of the ultra phones that sit at the top of the pile. Instead, they chose to launch a new device in 2023 with a 3-year-old entry-level phone chipset in it that they have had to source and will run out of at some point soon, as the chip was end of life before the Portal launched. Add in that the chip struggled to offer positive network access when it was new, let alone now, 4 years down the line. It comes back to a word that I've used a couple of times now: frustration. And that frustration is increased with the battery. Sony stated pre-launch that they were aiming for a similar battery life to the DualSense wireless controller. And at launch, this seemed to be a legitimate claim to me. 6 months down the line though, and disappointing would be a step up for this battery. For example, if you don't touch the Portal for 2 or 3 days because you have no need to, the Portal will fully drain its battery, meaning you have to recharge it and boot it up again before use, something a DualSense does not do. If you fully charge a Portal and then use it to game, it will empty that battery within 3 hours, falling 3 hours short of my shortest lasting DualSense. And bear in mind that this accessory does none of the computing on the device itself. It is essentially a fancy Wi-Fi controller with a screen in it. The battery life should be better than what it is, and maybe even better than a DualSense. But because it isn't, this device then negates one of its crowning features: its portability. With only 3 hours of battery life, for the majority of the time you will be using it near a wall socket to plug in quickly when that low battery warning pops up at the top of the screen. Add in the slow rate of charge for this device, and battery life is just plain disappointing. That regular charging all shows an additional problem with the device only 6 months in: its durability. These scratches on the back of the device appeared 1 month after having it, and have gradually gotten worse as it has been plugged in and out to charge. A silicone and rubber-wrapped cable has caused this much physical damage to the device in only 6 months. And bear in mind that I have been having a terrible experience with the Portal as a whole, so will actively avoid using it if I can, other than to make content and get a long-term review of it. This damage, therefore, isn't going to be as large or as impactful as someone who has had a usable experience and uses the device much more regularly. This is 6 months, minimal use, standard wear and tear. And it isn't good enough. Nor is the lack of a web browser, especially if you want to try and use external secure internet connections. Without a web browser to accept their terms and conditions, you're plumb out of luck. The lack of Bluetooth isn't good enough either. You can't use your existing earphones or earbuds with the Portal. You have to buy Sony's proprietary ones, or they are forcing you to dig out old wired headphones and, with a small press, hope that they still work. And if they don't, then buying their proprietary ones. The speakers aren't good enough. They get loud, sure, but they are very tinny and distort at anything above 40% volume. And it isn't good enough that the Portal only does remote play. Every other device that I have that does remote play does other things as well. Be that a phone, a media device, a standalone games console, every other device offers more than the Portal and was already in my possession, so wasn't an additional cost to me. Had the Portal been able to play PlayStation Cloud games natively, it may have found more of a use case for those already in the PlayStation ecosystem, but especially as a cheap gateway into the PlayStation ecosystem. But that didn't happen. And that word frustration comes back around. Now, there are good aspects to the Portal. It is the most comfortable handheld gaming device I have ever used after all, and I want more devices to copy its ergonomics. It has a fantastic screen despite only being LCD. The full suite of DualSense feedback is a must, as that controller is what's really making games next generation, so much more than the console itself. It is the easiest option for remote play, where you press 2 buttons and start playing. And as you can see, I run out of those positives pretty quickly. While they are all incredibly strong positive factors, when the remote play experience isn't usable, the core of the device, they matter very little at the end of the day. To wrap up and summarise for you then, if or when the Portal works as advertised, it's fantastic, and by far the best remote play experience available. It's simpler than all the other options, bigger and more immersive too. But that statement of when it works tells you the challenges and issues that this device faces, even now, 6 months after launch. There shouldn't be such a quantifying factor to the experience of such an expensive and premium accessory. Can you imagine the uproar there would be if that statement was made about the DualSense Edge controller or a PlayStation Link headset? Oh, they're great when they work, but it depends on some factors that you have no control over on if they work at all. They would be utter failures of accessories because they don't do the job advertised all of the time. As I've said, when the Portal works, it is amazing, and I would love to recommend it. But that major variance in experience, in the same house, same room, same user, same day, to go from excellent to unusable, is crushingly disappointing. It makes the Portal a complete failure in my eyes, because it cannot, reliably and consistently, do the job that it was marketed and made to do. Despite statements from Sony execs teasing cloud gaming on the device, that hasn't materialized within the first 6 months. And even if it does materialize in the future, it only covers 28 of the 195 countries worldwide, leaving most of the world with the same device that we have now. With a failure to launch worldwide as well, with places like Malaysia still missing out in May 2024, it's not even something that you can say is useful to every PlayStation 5 owner. With rumours of a new dedicated handheld swirling recently too, that can play these titles natively, access cloud gaming and remote play with much higher end and more reliable chipsets, it puts the Portal into even further question. For me, it is one massive problem, and then 100 little other things that come together to feel like an additional massive thing, that disappoint me every time that I use this accessory. Not being able to play a game because of the ultra-poor chipset and connection, battery dying really quickly even if you don't use all of the DualSense features, obtuse earphone options, IT support home network changes, and even then, it's not great. The Portal should have been a sure thing. Remote Play already works and is great on so many other devices. Instead, you've got a device that is either adored or hated, and much of that adoration tries to downplay and gatekeep legitimate concerns to sweep them aside and dismiss them. My experience has been shockingly bad, and I cannot in good conscience recommend this device to anyone. I can't even caveat a recommendation, because my experience has been that bad. For how well it performed in my 6 months of testing, the Portal is overpriced, underperforming, and has had next to zero support to improve its situation since launch. In my honest consumer opinion, do not buy a PlayStation Portal. Your money is better spent elsewhere. This review was produced after 6 months' use of a PlayStation Portal purchased personally by Doragon. Neither Sony, PlayStation, nor Qualcomm know this video is being made. They have no copy approval or early preview of the contents, and if they do see it, they will see it for the first time right alongside you. Thank you all so much for tuning in. If you've liked this video, I think these will also be of interest to you. In the meantime, my name is Doragon. You can find me on Threads at Doragon86 or in the Discord in the description. And until next time, folks, have yourselves a fantastic day. And take care.